Good evening, welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Police arrest suspended Adamawa resident electoral commissioner over conduct during governorship election. More than 100,000 people flee Sudan since heavy fighting broke out between rival forces. United Nations chief holds second day of talks with world powers today on how to deal with Taliban leaders. My name is Okpayemuni. The Nigerian police force has arrested Udu Yunusari, the suspended resident electoral commissioner, over his conduct during the governorship election in Adamawa State. First spokesperson Muyiwa Adejobi, in a statement today, said Mr. Yunusari is being grilled by the police. He noted that he is being grilled to ascertain the motives and motivations behind his alleged improper actions during the supplementary elections in Adamawa State. Mr. Adejobi said, in addition, other officials and individuals culpable in the saga have been interrogated by the team. The Inspector General of Police assured the public of a commitment of a force to ensure that justice is served in the case and that all guilty parties are brought to justice. The Senate has passed for second reading a bill seeking to establish an institution known as National Center for Christian Education. Legislation sponsored by Senator representing Adamawa South, Binus Yaroe, seeks to regulate the set standards acceptable to the practice of Christianity in the country. Yaroe said the inappropriate practice of religions in the country has caused problems in the past. Contributing to the debate, Senator representing Plateau North, Stephanus Yang, said wrongly practiced religion has bred extremism. Also speaking, Senator representing Benue South, Abamoro, said the bill is apt owing to the fact that some youths have been manipulated by extremist religious leaders. The bill passed the second reading after it was put to a voice vote by Senate President Ahmad Lawan. Senator Lawan referred the bill to the Committee on Education for further legislative input. As schools resumed today across the Federation, pupils were seen in different schools across Osogbo, the Osun State capital, prepared for another academic session. The students and school heads revealed how ready they were to commence the third term, which doubles as a promotional term. Olayin Kale visited some schools in Osogbo and filed in this report. We'll bring you this story later. Outside Nigeria, the United Nations says more than 100,000 people have fled Sudan since heavy fighting broke out between rival forces on the 15th of April. Officials warned of a full-blown catastrophe if fighting does not end. A further 334,000 people have been displaced within Sudan. Fighting is continuing in the capital, Khartoum, between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces, despite a ceasefire due to be in force. Earlier, the UN Special Envoy to Sudan, Volker Perthes, told the AP news agency that the two sides had agreed to enter into talks to negotiate a stable and reliable ceasefire. He added that Saudi Arabia was a potential venue for the talks. If talks take place, it will be the first meeting between the two sides since the conflict started. More than 500 people have been killed and more than 4,000 have been wounded in the fighting, according to Sudan's health ministry. In the meantime, the United Nations is warning that more than 800,000 people could flee Sudan because of the ongoing clashes between rival military factions. Fighting is continuing in the capital, Khartoum, despite promises of a ceasefire between the two sides. The clashes, which started more than 2 weeks ago, triggered an exodus of tens of thousands of Sudanese to neighboring countries, including Egypt, Chad, and the Central African Republic. UN Refugee Agency Chief Filippo Grandi tweeted that if violence does not stop, more people may be forced to flee Sudan seeking safety. The UN's humanitarian coordinator in Sudan, Abdul Dieng, said the conflict was turning into a full-blown catastrophe. Meanwhile, Eritrea's president has accused the two warring generals in Sudan of hijacking the 2019 revolution, saying the country could only have one army. Isaias Afwerki said there was an urgent need for the tragic and deplorable conflict to end, and the best way forward was to allow the regional group IGAD to resolve the crisis. Mr. Isaias said while the current situation in Sudan was a matter of global concern. IGAD's initiative would help the Sudanese people transition to what they had hoped to achieve after longtime leader Omar al-Bashir was ousted 4 years ago. He added that Eritrea was willing to provide assistance to this end. Mr. Azaz also said his country's sea, land borders, as well as its airspace, were open for Sudanese and others affected by the conflict, but he said it would not allow refugee camps to be set up in Eritrea. Still in Africa, a Ugandan National Army soldier has shot and killed a government minister he was guarding. Retired Colonel Charles Okello Angola, who was the Deputy Minister for Gender and Labour, was shot at his home in the early hours of today. It is not yet clear whether there was an argument between the soldier and Colonel Angola. The soldier, yet to be officially identified, then shot himself dead before turning the gun on himself. Some eyewitnesses said the soldier walked around the neighborhood shooting in the air. Initial reports suggest a number of people may be injured, and videos on social media showed locals gathering at the scene in shock.
Was shot dead by one of his bodyguards, Private Sabit Wilson, and also the ADC to the minister. One Otim Ronald sustained severe injuries and has been rushed to Murago Hospital and is being treated by the doctors there. And thereafter, Private Sabiti, the person who shot, also killed himself. And the investigations are being carried out. We also want to say barrier arrangements are going to be worked out, and the program shall be released once we have agreed upon it. I would like to convey condolences to the wife of the minister and the family. Condolences to the President of Uganda and the entire government and the ministers and the people of Lango, particularly his constituency, which he represented in the Parliament of Uganda, and all Ugandans. And we pray that the good Lord rests his soul in eternal peace. What I have told you, that this morning, one of his bodyguards opened fire on the minister and killed the minister, and also injured the ADC, who has been rushed to Murago, but he's able to talk, and the doctors were arranging to take him to theater because he sustained the injuries in one of the thighs and the arms. We hope that he will get out of danger.
A bus and a lorry have reportedly been set ablaze in separate incidents in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, amid protests organized by the opposition against the high cost of living and alleged electoral malpractices. Police have clashed with protesters in some parts of the city, but most areas have remained calm. In the Central Business District, some protest leaders who attempted to drop a petition at the president's office were dispersed by police with tear gas. Police have been deployed around the city to maintain security in the western counties of Kisumu and Homa Bay. Protesters blocked some roads by lighting fires. Many shops in Kisumu were closed with traders wary of looting and destruction witnessed during previous protests. Earlier, police officers were deployed on the streets of Kenya's capital, Nairobi, ahead of a planned protest by the opposition. Opposition leader Raila Odinga had vowed to resume protest amidst a warning from the authorities that they would not allow them in the interest of national security, and citing violence during past demonstrations. Still in Kenya, the leader of a cult group and 6 others have been rearrested minutes after a court in Malindi released them. Magistrate Ivy Wasike freed Paul Ntenge, Mackenzie, and the suspected accomplices after an application by the prosecution to close the file. State Prosecutor Vivian Kambaga said she wanted them to be tried in another court on charges that will include terrorism. They have been driven to neighboring Mombasa County, which is further south along the coast. They were initially charged with murder, radicalization, and threatening public safety after more than 100 followers of the cult group were found in mass graves last month. Mr. Mackenzie, the leader of the group, was accused of encouraging them to starve themselves to death, but he denies any wrongdoing. A post-mortem report showed that some of the victims were also killed through suffocation and strangulation. You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
Ahmadu Bello, a Prince Royal, was born 6th of December 1910 at Raba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Danfodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness and participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Western Spring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history. This iconic African presents the narrative of a man destined to exert an imperishable global influence in Western education. His was a story of a freeborn, captured and sold into slavery. He was born in Oshogun, a native Yoruba village near Iseyin in Okeogun axis of southwest Nigeria. Samuel Ajayi Crowther was the foundation student of Fora Bay College, Sierra Leone, the foremost university where the pioneer set of native Africans were educated. Samuel Ajayi Crowther's greatest contribution to humanity was his translation of the Holy Bible into the Yoruba language. The man who authored the Yoruba dictionary was also credited with the translation of English classic hymns into Yoruba and the Ekwere languages. Samuel Ajayi Crowther's private residence in Badagry, incidentally the first story building in Nigeria, is an archival museum dedicated to the memory of Africa's first bishop. Western Spring Television identifies Samuel Ajayi Crowther as a watershed character in history.
Welcome back on Spring Global. Here is the rest of the stories. United States estimates say more than 20,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in fighting in Ukraine since December. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said a further 80,000 have been wounded, citing newly declassified intelligence. Half of the dead are from the Wagner mercenary company, who have been attacking the eastern Bakhmut city.
Russians have suffered 100,000 casualties, including 20,000 killed, since the war of attrition intensified in Ukraine's Donetsk region in December, according to an estimate by the White House, as Kyiv readies for a new counteroffensive against Moscow's forces. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby on Monday said the figure was based on newly declassified United States intelligence. He did not detail how the intelligence community arrived at the number.
I think there are estimates out there. Certainly, we do the best we can to sort of to try to understand the conditions on the ground and the order of battle, as it were. If you're referring to numbers, I think in general, though, as we said today, since just December, in the fighting in the Donbass, particularly around a little town called Bakhmut, the Russians have suffered 100,000 casualties, over 20,000 killed in action, and of that 20,000, and again, this is just this December, and just in the Donbass area, about half of that 20,000 we estimate were Wagner employees, mercenaries, mostly convicts that Mr. Prigozhin went and let out of prison to go throw them at the fight at Bakhmut.
John Kirby added he was not giving estimates of Ukrainian casualties because they are the victims and Russia is the aggressor. The fiercest battles in the eastern province have been around the city of Bakhmut, where Wagner and other forces are fighting Ukrainian forces house to house to try to gain control of the last remaining road west that is still in Ukrainian hands, which makes it critical for supplies and fresh troops. The head of Ukrainian ground forces, Alexander Sersky, said that Russia continued to exert maximum effort to take Bakhmut, but that it so far had failed. With Ukraine preparing for a renewed counteroffensive to take back land occupied by Russia, Moscow in the early hours of Monday launched a second wave of nationwide missile strikes. Ukrainian air defenses destroyed 15 out of 18 missiles launched by Russia, but missile attacks on the eastern city of Pavlograd killed 2 people and injured 40, President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday. According to Zelensky, the terrorist missiles took the lives of 2 very young men, stating that 40 other people, including women, children, and men, were treated for wounds and injuries. The Ukrainian president also said a 14-year-old boy was killed close to his school when it was hit by a bomb in the Chernihiv region, close to the Russian border. Kiev city officials said all missile attacks directed at the capital were destroyed in the second attack on the city in 3 days. A top Ukrainian general said on Monday that counterattacks had ousted Russian forces from some positions in Bakhmut, but the situation remains difficult. Temitokbe Ajijalaoluwa Ola, Western Spring Television News.
A prominent Palestinian prisoner has died in an Israeli jail after 86 days on hunger strike. Khala Adnan was a senior figure in the militant group Islamic Jihad, who Israel had charged with terrorism offenses. The Israel Prison Service said the 45-year-old had refused medical treatment before he was found unconscious in his cell today. Hours after his death, militants fired 3 rockets from the Gaza Strip towards Israel, though no one was hurt. The Palestinian Prime Minister accused Israel of deliberately assassinating Adnan, while Islamic Jihad warned Israel that it would pay the highest price. Still in the Middle East, United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres held a second day of talks with world powers today on how to deal with Afghanistan's Taliban leaders amidst warnings from the Kabul administration that the meeting could be counterproductive. The talks in Doha were arranged by Mr. Guterres after the Taliban government banned Afghan women from working for the United Nations, prompting the world body to put its huge relief operations in Afghanistan under review. Speaking at a news conference after the Doha meeting, Mr. Guterres said that the meeting was about developing a common international approach, not about recognition of the de facto Taliban authorities. The talks involve envoys from the United States, Russia, China, and 20 other countries and organizations, including major European donors and neighbors such as Pakistan, but exclude the Taliban government. Meanwhile, Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi will lead a delegation to Islamabad at the end of the week for talks with Pakistani and Chinese officials.
And I'm so pleased that we were able to enter this meeting with unanimous Security Council Resolution 2681 of 27 April, calling for full, equal, meaningful and safe participation of women and girls in Afghanistan. And the spirit of unity shown in the adoption of the resolution was carried over into the meeting we just had. The meeting was about developing a common international approach, not about recognition of the de facto Taliban authorities. And what was important is that we all understand each other's concerns and limitations, but agreed that it was in everyone's interest for most Afghans to work together. Participants agreed on the need for a strategy of engagement that allows for the stabilization of Afghanistan, but also allows for addressing important concerns. The participants are worried about the stability of Afghanistan and have expressed those serious concerns. They relate to the persistent presence of terrorist organizations, a risk for the country, the region, and further afield. The lack of inclusivity, which importantly includes human rights, in particular those of women and girls, severely undermined by recent Taliban decisions. And the spread of drug trafficking with all its dramatic consequences.
In Asia, lawmakers are introducing Japan's first laws against taking sexually exploitative photos or videos of others without consent. The bill against photo voyeurism would prohibit acts such as obfuscating and secret filming of sexual acts. Until now, such criminal cases had to be prosecuted under local prefecture laws, which greatly vary in scope. The bill is part of the wider overhaul of Japan's laws on sex crimes, which will also expand the definition of rape. It criminalizes the act of taking photographs of people being manipulated without their knowledge into sexual positions. Specifically, the bill bans the filming of children in a sexual manner without justifiable reason. India's domestic air traffic has hit a record high with 456,082 passengers flying on a single day. The milestone, which was reached on the 30th of April, came as 2,978 flights took off across the country. India's post-pandemic economic recovery has spurred a travel boom. More than 37.5 million passengers were carried by domestic airlines in just the first 3 months of 2023. This marked a 51.7% growth compared to a year ago, according to data from the country's Directorate General of Civil Aviation. Oil and gas giant BP has reported strong profits for the beginning of the year as energy prices remain high. Profits hit $5 billion in the first 3 months of the year, although this was down from $6.2 billion last year, with oil prices having fallen from the peak seen after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Bumper profits from energy firms have led to calls for them to pay more tax, with households facing high bills. Labour and the Liberal Democrats called for changes to the windfall tax. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer called for a proper windfall tax on energy profits.
It shows that these really huge profits are continuing. This isn't the first, but £4 billion, that's a huge amount of money. And it's always worth bearing in mind that, of course, we want BP and others to make profits so they can invest, but these are profits they didn't expect to make. These are profits over and above because the world price of energy is so high. The question then becomes a political question. Well, what's the choice that you make in relation to that? What we say in the Labour Party is have a proper windfall tax that's effective and use that money directly to freeze council tax. So this year, people are facing council tax increases on top of everything else. People are really struggling with their bills, as you know. We say use an effective windfall tax to freeze those bills. The government, unfortunately, has got loopholes in the windfall tax they've put in place, so they're not using that money effectively. And that's why, in the end, this is one of the choices that's going to be on the ballot paper for Thursday, because this is a cost of living crisis.
The owner of the dating apps Tinder and Inc. has announced it will stop operating in Russia more than a year after the war in Ukraine broke out. Match Group said its brands were taking steps to restrict access to services and would withdraw from the Russian market completely by the 30th of June. The announcement comes after many global companies cut ties with Russia after the invasion in February 2022. The U.S. company made the announcement in its annual report today, adding that it was committed to protecting human rights. To some sports stories, FIFA President Gianni Infantino has threatened to not broadcast the Women's World Cup in 5 European countries unless TV companies improve their rights offers. Infantino said disappointed offers from the UK, Spain, Italy, Germany and France were a slap in the face of the players and all women worldwide. He added that it was FIFA's moral and legal obligation not to undersell the event. The World Cup, co-hosted by Australia and New Zealand, starts on the 20th of July. Infantino said European broadcasters had offered World Football's governing body $1 million to $10 million for the rights, compared with $100 million to $200 million for the Men's World Cup. The rights offers for previous tournaments were bundled together with other events, including the Men's World Cup, but FIFA has now separated the bidding process.
Broadcasters, especially public broadcasters funded by taxpayers' money, should put their action behind their words, because they rightfully criticize football organizations or other sports organizations for not paying equally women and men, or not having the same prize money. Well, we need to generate these revenues, and they should help us, because otherwise we'll simply not sell these rights at these undervalued prices to them. And well, the European public will not be able to watch the Women's World Cup, which, after the success of the last tournament in France, after the success of the Euro, would be really.
Leeds United are set to sack manager Avi Garcia and are in talks to appoint former England boss Sam Allardyce. Director of Football Victor Otter has left by mutual consent. Leeds are 17th in the Premier League, above the relegation zone, only on goal difference, with 4 games left this season. Garcia, appointed in February as Jesse Marsch's successor, has won only 3 of 11 league games in charge. Leeds have lost 4 of their past 5 games and face leaders Manchester City on Saturday. Before we end Spring Global, here's a recap of our top stories. The Nigeria Police Force has arrested Udu Yunusa Ari, the suspended resident electoral commissioner, over his conduct during the governorship election in Adamawa State. The United Nations says more than 100,000 people have fled Sudan since heavy fighting broke out between rival forces on the 15th of April. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres held a second day of talks with world powers today on how to deal with Afghanistan's Taliban leaders amidst warnings from the Kabul administration that the meeting could be counterproductive. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Okoye Muni. Thanks for watching.